First of all, I wanted, we heard a lot of stories today, a lot of facts that we're in a really big situation here in Kewaunee County, and it's not something we can take lightly because the regulatory and legal deck is stacked against us. So what do? We learned, we know what's going to happen because we look anywhere in this state. We look in North Carolina, we look in Iowa, and we know what's going to happen. Do we want that to happen here? No. Okay, so but we have to be careful that we don't remain a closed system. Because good dynamic change does not happen when we're preaching to the choir. And we have a problem in Bayfield County right now because the farmers that were here before Rex came in, they're not happy with us. They're not happy with Cap 51 being passed on the county level. They're seeing regulations that are being passed because a guy from Iowa with 610,000 hogs brought to market last year, he's moving into our community. And so in order for this to become good, lasting, dynamic change, we have to open our circle. You got to be brave and go in, and you see someone you think might be pro-CAFO, just say, why do you think that? What's going on? What's your reasoning? Why does this make sense to you? And then shut your mouth and listen. Because we don't want Bayfield County to become the tired, boring, stupid story that happens every time big money comes into an area where there's not a lot of, the perception is we don't have a lot of resources, we need help, we need jobs, we need all this stuff. And I always wonder, like, who are they talking to? Yeah. I'd be like, where is that? And so maybe we need to find out, who are they talking to? Find those people and ask the question. Because we don't want to become, it's such a tired story, and we can change it. But it requires commitment. It requires being brave and going into coffee shops and bars and homes and churches and ask, tell me why you think that, and take it from there. Because that's what we want to see. We can stop this. We saw what happened with GTAC. And we the people works. But you just can't be doing all this talking, you gotta put it into action. Because otherwise it's just a bunch of talking. So speaking of talking, we're gonna do Q&A. For a little bit here, like till 4:30, let's say. So I guess raise your hand, no grandstanding, just really good questions, let's get some good answers. And I'll just call on you, I guess. And then, yeah, okay, Scott? Yeah. Yes, Scott.
So, I want to just ask you all. We have, Mr. Ikerd, I think that you really brought it home. This to tear up the social fabric of the community. And one of my greatest concerns is that our local farmers are going to get alienated by this movement to protect the water from this large operation. And what is it that we can do to help support our existing local family farms, and in a way that lets them know that we support them and that we're concerned about this scale that is much beyond what is happening here?
Well, let me say I'm not too optimistic that'll work, but let me give you the best I can give you on it. First of all, I think with respect to the farmers that are in the system, the farmers that believe in industrial agriculture, I think focus on the system, as I tried to do here. Focus on the fact that these farmers are in a system and be sympathetic or empathetic from the standpoint of saying that the people at their university and the people in the Department of Agriculture are telling them this is the way you farm if you're a modern farmer. So recognize that's kind of where they're coming from, and that doesn't mean you have to accept that system. But I think if you say, okay, it's not about that you're a bad individual or necessarily those bad individuals, there's people that are caught in that system. And I can tell you, as I said before, I used to believe in that system. So I kind of have a sense of where they're coming from. So if you focus not on the individual person, but on the system. And then the other is to support the alternative. I didn't go into a lot of that, but it's mentioned elsewhere. This whole organic, sustainable agriculture, local foods, you've got a lot of that going on here. And I think supporting the farmers and the farmers that have supported this conference is a way of saying we're not opposed to agriculture, we just don't believe in this particular kind of agriculture. I don't know much to do beyond that. Maybe somebody else has.
Right here in the corner, but yeah.
Can I answer that real quick? I think the one thing that your local farmers should realize is, coming from a county that has 15 CAFOs, when you start to have industrial agriculture in this scale, it actually makes it so your young people that want to get into farming can't. Because as they expand, they have the ability to buy the land for higher prices than young people can. They also have the ability to dictate what land prices will be. We find it in our community that the one thing you have to realize too is, value for residential property goes down because nobody wants to live by one of these things. But the price for agriculture land goes up. So that means even if a farmer wants to transfer his farm to his son, his children, it's going to cost him more to do that, because those children then have to pay higher tax rates just to acquire that land. So you have to realize this is driving out the family farmers, the small farmers that are currently here. And these big farmers, they're not going to purchase from the little guy. He can go to wherever the price is cheapest for him to buy for their feed. Those hogs that are going to be here, he doesn't have to feed them from stuff that's grown here. He can go wherever he wants to get it, and he'll get it as cheap as possible. And that is one thing that we do see. So he is not, when you bring in big industrial agriculture, it's driving out those small farms. And remember, I am a farmer. It is, that is the reality of what's taking place in Kewaunee County.
My question is a good segue to what you just said, and again, I would address it especially to you and to Gordon, but any of you. I was just chatting before with a young farmer, and I said, are there many farmers here? Are there? Okay, great. Oh, he said a handful, but that's 2 handfuls. That's one. What about if they were to lead us in whatever awareness we wanted to do? So it didn't look just like the tree huggers, but it was the people who are really, truly part of the farmers. And then we could do some of the things that John was talking about. What about that?
Well, I certainly agree, but don't let people call you names. It is another thing. I don't think people I don't think someone who does not want to see their children get ill is a tree hugger. I don't think someone who thinks that the loss of part of Lake Michigan, namely Green Bay, is something that some gluten-free vegan Democrat has come up. So I think it would be wonderful to have the farmers out in front here, but on the other hand, there's no difference between a farmer and any of the rest of us.
Just to add from the standpoint of farmers, I think it's great that you had farmers that were, supporting the conference today, that were open sponsors and said we're supporting this. And I think one thing farmers can always do for good meetings is to make available local food. This may be a bad time of the year, but you always really need to have local food. And any farmer that wants to join in the leadership of the organization, I'm sure they'd be welcome. But I don't think that just focusing and saying, well, if the farmers won't lead, we won't do anything, then I don't agree with that. But I think you've got a good start in bringing farming in.
Good question. I think this is probably not important, but as you know, we passed a moratorium, our Kewaunee County board passed a moratorium, and that's whether it's going to apply right. A lot of people are wondering what the answer to that is. I'm the way I told before, I tried to answer it. My view is that if there's discretion involved in reviewing the application that's submitted, then creating credibility of the application, it's not a best. It's not a best application.
No problem. Thank you.
And the question is, we've heard a lot about nutrient management.
I did.
And I'm wondering if you can tell us how much discretion is involved in developing a nutrient management plan. How do you weigh the credibility of a nutrient management plan of the group together? Can you do that with the open at? Do you have to really get out of the ground, or you have a hearing and test the credibility of what's
In the early days of the program, the nutrient management plans that came in might have been 20 pages long. That was a short one. The kinds of nutrient management plans we saw maybe 5 years ago came in and was about the size of 3 telephone books in New York City. They're even bigger now, and they're all electronic. They come in a bundle of CDs or on a couple of zip drives. You can't make head nor tails of a nutrient management plan. That's the answer to that question. A nutrient management plan is an incredibly complicated document that is put together over virtually hundreds of hours by well-meaning and sincere nutrient management planners. There's an accreditation program, in fact, for the state for nutrient management planning. But the fact of the matter is that if you take a look at that nutrient management plan and you start feeding those CDs into your computer, you're soon going to be very confused, very tired, and you will feel like you know less than what you started with. Keep in mind, as has already been said, what a nutrient management plan does. It optimizes agricultural productivity for the farmer with environmental consideration perhaps in a secondary place, with air management issues. They're completely void of air management issues. There are no air management regulations that apply to CAFOs, and in fact the CAFO rules are completely void of public health. There are no limits on E. coli or Campylobacter or Salmonella or any of those other things. So the issue with nutrient management plans is it's a good idea gone awry.
I'd like to say something on it too. In Door County, the Soil and Water Office there did a review of 8 nutrient management plans for 8 different farms. And Bill Schuster, their director, said all 8 had falsified records. The one thing that we have to understand I think actually with all of these things, especially with nutrient management plans, is I've looked at way too many. That's the nutrient management plan is a waste disposal. So the numbers can be made to do just about anything. They're not a good tool for regulating anything. And as far as the permitting process, I think the one thing that you should be looking for, everybody here, is have them actually produce those documents. In my county, we hear it continuously for expansions and things like that they have every permit. Well, come to find out, they don't have any permits. You know, until the actual piece of paper with the signed signature of the person that issued that permit is in their hand, they don't have a permit. Whether it's a building permit, you know, just like any other citizen. If you go to build something and you don't have the actual signed building permit, you don't have a permit. And that's the issue that they keep trying to put out is again and again and over again, is as soon as there's any opposition to a CAFO being built, that they come out and produce so-called all these permits, but they never have a piece of paper that actually shows it. And I think that's what you need to see. You need that signed document.
All right, well, first I'd just like to say, as a vegetarian, environmentalist, tree hugger who looks a lot like a hippie, I hope that we can stop dissing the people who have been correct for all these years. I have people laughing at me on all sides. And we're right, and we were right about the mine, and we're right about the other things too, so let's stop dissing the people that happen to have taken a stand and have been right. It's kind of embarrassing. I'm not a hippie either. They all died. I'm a technical painting, and I have a technical question for all four people. Looking at the situation where we have made this moratorium, and let's have a hand for that. And by the way, I put my profile incredibly low for this because I didn't want that branding for all our farmers and people like you. The thing about it is, we've got a 12-month period now where we'll have a board-appointed group, mostly of board members, but then of 3 citizens that are going to design whatever we do to affect governance of CAFOs. What do you four people suggest are simple ideas for regulating CAFOs in our county that can make them either uneconomically viable because they're doing them right is too expensive, or make them effective and safe? What kind of words can we put together? Simple words, so everybody understands them, understands we're not attacking farmers that are here or reasonable farm operations, but will regulate our county in a way that will keep it safe. I've been told by several different people, including some legal people, that we can't do it. I think George said local government can regulate this. I want to know how.
I'm going to go first because I have the worst chance of having good advice on this one. We get contacted at the center that I work for all the time to ask similar advice. And what I would tell you, I guess, is I'd say that sunshine is the best medicine. I think asking for transparency and proceedings of everything about the operation is a great way to deter someone from wanting to come into your community. If you have access to understand how things work, this industry doesn't like that transparency, and it may be enough in and of itself to keep people out. That's if you can keep them out.
I spent about a quarter century of my life literally dancing on the top of a picket fence with folks like you on one side and some pretty powerful and angry farmers on the other. And what I can tell you, the question was, you know, how can we get sort of CAFOs corralled here so that we can all coexist. I think John said it about as clearly as anybody. You don't want any CAFOs in this country.
How do you do that?
I think the best way to regulate CAFOs eventually and I think they will become economically infeasible once you do this, is to pass a responsible, well thought out local health ordinance. And there'll be people that will tell you can't do that you don't have the right to do it or whatever. But I believe you have an inherent human right to protect your health within the community. Now, in the state of Iowa, in the state of Missouri, there's something like 19 counties that have local health ordinances that are in place that have been upheld by the Western District Supreme Court, Western District Court supporting the Missouri Supreme Court that said that Missourians had a right to have local health ordinances. In Iowa, there were 4 counties that passed health ordinances, and they were overruled by the Supreme Court. But I think if you go back and read the ruling, I've been trying to get legal people on that. Maybe you could look into this. But as I interpret what the judge ruled, is the judge said, what you've done here is that you haven't really written health ordinances. You've written what I call zoning ordinances. And that regulation of agriculture with respect to placement and setbacks and all of that is the state's right, not the local community's right. So I don't think the judge there actually ruled on whether it was legal to have a health ordinance. But the reason I say health ordinance is the health ordinance is one of the few things, public health is one of the few things that trumps economic interest. You can interfere with interstate commerce, at least all previous Supreme Courts have ruled that, if it's necessary to protect public health. So I think if you can come up with legitimate health ordinances that are based on good science, good information that says this is the way a CAFO would have to operate in this county, this community, in a way that did not impose risk, health risk on the community around it. I think that would be the strongest thing, and you'd probably need to prepare maybe to take it all the way to the Supreme Court to prove your right to it. But I think you'd have all kinds of support once you started through the legal system of other people that are going to set a precedent.
I'll tell you about one legal case. This will sound odd, but the Wisconsin Supreme Court just a few months ago determined that manure was a pollutant. Now you know that sounds weird. I think most of us have known that forever, but the Wisconsin Supreme Court just decided that. Now the significance of that is that an insurance company said they were not going to pay for damages that were caused by a well contamination by a farmer from liquid manure. And the liability, therefore, the liability policy that insurance company had written for that farmer did not apply. The Supreme Court agreed with the insurance company. Now, maybe hearing from people like us, they don't like to hear that, but if their insurance agent says, sorry, that $250,000 is on your dime, they listen to that.
I just want to ask, did any of the farmers that are here have any questions? We've heard from a lot of, closely people. I'm just wondering, any farmers, do you have any questions you want to ask? Oh, okay.
Hi. I'm from Angel's Farm, and those of us that have put our names out there against the CAFO will need your support, because we will now be targeted as operations to be put down, quieted against our movement towards not having this. And it has been mentioned by political entities that all they have to do is wait and the public will quiet down and it won't be an issue anymore if enough time goes by. So I guess my point, my question is, does that typically happen if people are quiet, or if time goes by, in your experience?
We've got 15 CAFOs, and we're not quiet. We will not ever be quiet. The one thing that I think, and John kind of went into it with his talk, is we need to understand that this is really, in the long run, this is going to be determined by the consumer. The American consumer is very educated right now. The American consumer does not want their food coming from a factory farm. The young people, I've been raising grass-fed beef for over 20 years. I used to have to convince people why they should buy grass-fed beef. I used to have to give away beef to get them just to try it. I did a lot of farmers markets. In the last 5 years, I have had young mothers come up to me with a list of how they wanted their food raised. Young mothers change the world. This is a failed system. Mothers of the world are driving it. It's just a matter of how long it's going to last.
About the young farmers, I agree with everything you were saying here. The community really needs to support the young folks that are doing something different. You all are in the process of recreating the food system. Now, thankfully, I get to spend enough time with people that are doing what you all are doing that keeps me from going insane by dealing with people that are fighting CAFOs. I don't know how you people can do it week in and week out, or year in and year out. But the success of this new food system that you're creating here depends upon communities. The next presentation I make is going to be about the importance of communities in solving basically every problem that we're confronted with. But you have to have the support of the community. You have to bring the community together with the consumers and people. I talked about a consensus for what you want to do. And if that consensus of the community is that we want a different kind of food system and a different kind of agriculture here, then the community is going to have to support people that are helping to create that. You know, we don't know what it's going to look like because you're in the process of creating. Nobody can tell you what to do, but you have to work it out together, and you have to support each other, and you have to maintain that support and that commitment over the long run, because we're evolving towards something fundamentally different. And that's what the other folks are trying to stop.
Okay, we've got time for one more question. So, and also I want to tell you that the paper that John talked about, that's going to be available on the website, which is farmsnotfactories.com. It'll be under the resources tab, whatever. So I'll put that up tonight. Yep, Ed.
Thank you. Can you discern the difference in manure application? This CAFO says they're going to disc split, not area. And you folks have been very well addressing area.
We hear this a lot. One thing you have to understand is when they're saying that they're going to be knifing in or they're going to be injecting, this does not necessarily mean that it actually comes out at the bottom under the ground. Injecting is a whole gamut of application methods. The one that actually we see most is they'll have a tractor, there's a hose that goes out to the tractor, they have the injectors behind it. The only thing is the injectors are actually, all they do is slop the stuff onto the ground, and then they have tines that come behind it to open up the ground for it to go into it. The one thing you have to really worry about this though is, in most areas, especially when you have water and clay, they have tile lines. And a tile line is a perforated pipe that's under the ground to help to drain that field in the spring of the year so that it's dry enough so they can get into it. Usually those are approximately 18 inches to 2 feet under the ground. If you're injecting at 12 to 18 inches, it goes really fast down to that tile line. And that tile line goes to your streams, your rivers, and eventually to your lake. That's one of the big issues we're seeing in Kewaunee County with our rivers is, and again, to the lake, is they're tiling everything. And if most CAFOs, they want to have those fields tiled every 50 feet to 100 feet. They have these tiles, so they have a direct conduit to the water, which is going to flush it away. That's what they want to do. They locate in areas where there is waterways. Because with the nutrient management plans, the more nutrients that disappear, the more manure they can put on. So if it gets to a tile line and washes out to the lake, that's good for them. They then, when they do their next soil test in 5 years, they don't have to do it on a yearly basis and report it on a nutrient management plan. Every 5 years, there's going to be fewer nutrients in that land, they can apply more, and they can keep operating the way they want to. And one of the big things that we see is, first year that, after that test has been done, they really slop it on, and then they reduce it down up until year 5, so those nutrients have dissipated, have been flushed out of that ground, out of that soil. Unfortunately, it's flushed into your lake.
Okay. Well, thank you all for coming. I want to mention one thing quickly. Every single one of these men came here pro bono to talk to us today. Sign up in the back. There's a little sign up sheet. Give us your email address and we'll keep you abreast of everything that's going on. Mary! Mary! Mary!
Okay, thank you.
You gotta go tell them, you know, over all of that.